These writers that you see on your screen, Mark Twain, Ernest Hemingway, and Kurt Vonnegut, are some of the greatest writers in American history. Yet at some point during their lives, they struggled to write, whether that was coming up with ideas or putting their ideas into words. Now, despite this, they still managed to become world-renowned authors that we know today. So you can see that they were confronted with the same issues as students who are forced to do writing at school. So yes, writing and communication can be frustrating. And even though it's a skill that would make most things that we do a lot easier, it's still difficult to put that first word on a Word document. So that's why I wanted to cover a writing process containing 5 steps that drastically improved my own writing. And hopefully you can see how this can save time and tears while also maximizing your results. Your writing ideas give life to your piece, and it's definitely one of the most essential things. And because of this, one of the worst feelings when writing is knowing what you vaguely want to say, but not being able to put that to paper. And one major reason that I found was that you just probably haven't been exposed to enough new ideas. So how did I go about this? Well, it's like the most common piece of advice that you hear: read more. But with a small twist, because I know this may annoy some people because it definitely annoyed me since I wasn't exactly a fan of reading. But what I found is that the amount of reading that you had to do was not a lot. So that means you don't have to digest the entire library or start reading useless things. And instead, you can take a much more targeted approach. And for me, I mainly read reputable articles about the topic that I was looking at. So although these tips can be applied to any writing, let's just say you're looking at a particular text. So when I was doing this in school, I would just type the title of the text and then follow that with analysis or summary. And this gives you a whole list of reputable articles that have already summarized and analyzed the key points of this text. And this gives you a fundamental part of your essay writing, which is the ideas. And in reality, these are just some of the options that you can look at. And of course, there are many more. And information found on these sources can be quite scattered. So after reading, it's important to process the information. In this step, we want to compile our ideas in a notebook or a Word document. And it's good to group your findings based off certain criteria, which entirely depend on your preference. But some common types of categories are based on themes or topic, and that applies to any writing task. Chapters, if you're doing a text, and topic sentences, if you're doing this for an essay. And one more resource that I found most helpful, and that's rather than relying on unprocessed forms of information that you find online, why not find an already refined piece of writing? In other words, sample essays are always your best friend, because they show you everything you need for a particular topic. After you see patterns of writing that high-scoring students do, you can replicate their writing style. And just like many artists who learn to paint through imitating other artists, when you read sample essays, highlight the sentences or phrases that you think are good and can be used in your own essay. And rather than just looking at what has been written, think about why the writer wrote it in this way, because the power comes from when we learn by imitating style, not just the content. Now let's start drafting our essay. And I want to again use the comparison from before, that writing is like art. When artists do an artwork, it's very rare for them to start by focusing on the tiny details from the top left corner of the page. And instead, most artists start by doing a quick sketch, and then they bold in those lines, add some final adjustments, then they start adding in the shading or the color, and so on. And this is how I approached my first draft essay as well. So first you need a basic sketch of your essay. And what this is your contention, also known as your thesis or your stance, and your topic sentences. Then I would find supporting examples. And sometimes I don't even put that into words. Like I might just say, insert example about ambition. After this is when you can start fleshing out each example. And at any time, if you can't think of a way to write something, rather than dwelling on it for an hour, just put a note on the side saying, for example, add another quote, flesh out an idea, needs more thought, or something like that. But basically, you don't want too much friction when you're doing your very first draft, because you can always fine-tune the details later, which will be much easier if you already have a solid foundation in place. So I mentioned Ernest Hemingway before, and if you were to guess where he did a decent amount of writing, you might guess maybe in front of his typewriter or at an office. Well, actually, it was his bedroom and cafes. Now, this isn't an invitation to go to your nearest Starbucks. It's the simple fact that changing your environment may give you the inspiration and ideas to make your draft essay even better. That's why I always carried my phone or notebook around, especially on, let's say, the train to school, to jot down any ideas or changes that I needed to make. And even if you aren't consciously thinking about your essay, your subconscious brain is. So that's why it's very common to suddenly think of great ideas at random times. And with this, you should be able to make some further changes to your draft, and by this stage, it should start to look like a full essay. If you wanted to sculpt something, you need to start off with a large slab of rock and then chisel it down to, let's say, a statue. And for essay writing, we can also start off with our essay and gradually make edits and changes and carve it into something better. Here are just some general tips that you can look at after you've gotten a full essay. And the final step is some form of feedback, either from yourself, a student, or a teacher, because it's always great to get another point of view. And during this feedback phase, you might find that these 5 steps are not linear. For example, if you feel like you need to add a bit more to one of your paragraphs, you might go back to the ideas step and sharpen your ideas, only this time it's going to take a fraction of the amount of time. So, all in all, the biggest takeaway is that the art of writing is that it's done in a non-linear fashion. It's done through inspiration over a time period that's hopefully longer than the night before the due date. And it's also done by building a foundation, refining the details, and then making it as great as possible.